Hello and welcome to Veeam Industry Insights. My name is Jeff Reichert. I'm on Veeam's product strategy team, and we have a great show lined up for you today. Welcome from wherever you're joining from. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I am joined today by Cayetana Weinshard and by Mario Merkovich on Atos's compliance teams and on their cyber recovery teams. I've got a quick slide, if we could show that, Jeffrey, with everyone's info. But Cayetana, why don't you introduce our audience today to what you do at Atos?
Well, currently I'm working at Atos as a consultant cybersecurity specialized in compliancy and moreover in the NIS2. But I have to be honest, I have a background in physical security, works for years at the Dutch government, making sure that important people stay safe. And some years ago, I switched from physical security to cybersecurity because I believe in a proactive approach. And also we're seeing that the threat against persons is moving to the digital domain. So for that reason, I also decided to make this switch. And yeah, I also have a background in psychology, so I'm always trying to connect people's expertise in order to ensure security.
Wow, very exciting, and a lot of good things we can dig into there. Mario, we've had you on the show before, and I'm always delighted to talk with you about Atos Cyber Recovery with Veeam. Why don't you tell our audience today a little bit about what you run at Atos?
Thank you very much, Jeff, for having us again here. And yeah, my name is Mario Merkovich. I'm based in Austria, and I'm one of the global product managers in our division called Technology Services for Cyber Recovery, and in specifically and in general for digital resilience in general. And yeah, on top of that, you know, everybody of us has a couple of roles, and one of my other roles will be partner BDM. And yeah, basically we are trying to push that topic forward to bring resiliency to everybody.
Fantastic. Well, I'm delighted you brought up where you're joining from today, because I'd like to remind our audience, whatever platform you are joining from, please use the chat function on that platform if you have any questions for Cayetana or for Mario during today's call. And as we usually request, if you could also volunteer in the platform that you're streaming from, where you are joining us from today. We'd love to hear. We will, as we usually do, populate the map showing where we have folks logged in from today. So please do volunteer that information, pop that in the chat, and we will update the map a couple of times as we go through the talk today. So those of you that tune in frequently to Industry Insights know that we love to lean into our research here at Veeam. And I'm just going to open a little bit with some of that research, again, to remind folks why we are seeing legislation like NIS2 that Cayetana consults on, and related legislation here in the United States and indeed around the world. In this year's Ransomware Trends and Data Protection Trends reports, we learned that 75% of organizations surveyed had a threat actor get on the network and attempt, either successfully or unsuccessfully, to detonate a ransomware attack. Now, when we, in the Ransomware Trends survey, asked folks, okay, the threat actor set off an attack, did you need to pay a ransom? Only 15% of respondents were able to recover from a ransomware attack without paying a ransom. Now, we're going to be talking today about the EU's NIS2 Directive, which is all about cyber resilience. And if you think about the fact that of 1,200 organizations globally that Veeam surveyed in June and May of this year, the information was published in June, only 15% were able to recover without paying a ransom. You can see we've got a long way to go on the resilience front. Unfortunately, 81% of organizations paid a ransom, and a third of those, that is 27%, paid the ransom and still didn't get their data back, which again highlights why it is so critical for organizations to be able to take advantage of things like the cyber recovery, cyber resilience offerings that Atos and Veeam bring to market together. And that's what Mario will be talking about a little bit later in the talk today. But if we go on, Cayetana, I'd like to pivot to you for the next part of the talk. You consult with organizations about how they're doing in their preparations for the EU's NIS2 directive. And I'm going to change slides here to show a slide that has a brief overview of the requirements around NIS2. Can you walk us through, in your experience consulting with organizations, where organizations that you talk to are in their preparations for NIS2? How are organizations doing?
Well, to be honest, you're seeing here 4 subjects that I divided NIS2 in, and I'm seeing that most organizations stop in the first 2 parts. Of course, NIS2 got live 17 October of this year, but that is the directive itself. Afterwards, all the companies within the EU are responsible for their own national implementation of the NIS2. Of course, they have to implement all the requirements of NIS2, but they also have space to ask for additional requirements. But you have to think that NIS2 targets both essential and important organizations. And there's also a very big difference in the level of maturity of those organizations. So most organizations are now performing gap analysis to see whether their ISMS and their NIS2 requirements, if they align. But for me, the 3rd part is way more important. Because NIS2, for example, requires that a management from organizations is aware of their security measures and that they can also be held responsible for cybersecurity incidents. So I believe organizations should focus more on those. Make sure that the management is aware of the security measures, that they are trained, that we are including our suppliers in our approach. So yeah, I'm looking more to the practical side of NIS2 than only the think or the check of compliancy.
No, that makes a ton of sense. And I think we've all, over the years, Cayetana, seen well-meaning security frameworks or sets of requirements or sets of controls be reduced to checkboxes that, while they may fulfill the letter of the directive or the letter of the regulation or law, don't actually fill the requirement. And what you're talking about here with implementing and then improving and running is not just designed to get the EU or your local regulator off your back. It's designed actually to make the EU more resilient. And that's what you're pointing to in this, right?
Yes, that is indeed true. And I also believe that we should explain it like this to our organizations within the EU, to not only see it as an extra work that they have to fulfill to become compliant, but also the benefits NIS2 holds for them. Because, for example, if you are following the controls of the NIS2 and going further than only compliancy, but making sure that all layers within the organizations are aware of your security measures related to cryptography, access management, asset management, then we can make the EU as a whole more cyber resilient. And also, yeah, because we cannot prevent cyber incidents to occur, but we can make sure that afterwards organizations also know how to approach those incidents. And most of the times those incidents are not only targeting one organization, but they can target all of the supply chain. And for that reason, NIS2 also requires that essential or important organizations are well aware of all their suppliers, and that they are also checking if the suppliers are also following the NIS2 ISMS security measures.
That makes a ton of sense. And frankly, I'm sure that what you just described will resonate with a lot of our viewers today, because I know at Veeam, we're constantly being asked by our customers about our security posture. And I think that's a very standard thing that organizations of all types are dealing with now with their relations with their customers and with their own suppliers. Now, I'm curious about something, especially being an American here in the US context. We don't necessarily have the idea of EU directives that you mentioned before. Now, you mentioned that it went live, but each member state in the EU implements the NIS2 directive basically according to their own guidelines, and they can even add requirements if they want to. Can you tell us any states that have actually rolled the requirements out, that are fully done with that, and maybe where other states are with implementing those?
Yes, for example, I'm here based in the Netherlands. The Netherlands is not fully done still with the NIS2 implementation, but we're working on it. We're already quite far. But Belgium, for example, is one of the countries that already finalized NIS2 implementation. And what you're seeing is that Belgium gives a lot of importance specifically to the supply chain requirements, but also to the management awareness of security incidents, and management even is even obliged to do certain assessments to also test if they are aware of the security measures within their organizations, if they are essential and or important. But you're seeing also within the EU that a lot of countries are looking at each other, also wanted to see which additional requirements another country has before they also finalize their own implementation.
Of course, that makes a ton of sense. Well, I'm glad that Belgium is doing well on that, and I hope that the other member states that are busy looking at Belgium and at their peers are catching up. Is there a hard deadline for member states to roll out their own national version of the directive?
Well, honestly, the member states should already have finalized their NIS2 implementation by 17 October of this year. So, and the more later they are, the bigger the consequences could be. But the organizations themselves cannot be held responsible. But let's hope that within 1 year, almost all countries within the EU are done with their national implementation. And after that deadline, the organizations themselves also have, depending on the countries, 1 until some years to fully implement NIS2 within their organization. So that is positive for maybe the listeners of today.
Got it. That makes sense. So let's change gears. You're consulting. Well, actually, we'll hold off. Jeffrey, I believe that we have the map ready to show. Could you bring the map up so we can see where we have folks joining from today? Okay, so you can see that we have from here in the United States, we have folks who have joined from Texas, from Ohio, from Connecticut, and for Europe, the Middle East, and Africa, we have the Netherlands. We also have folks who have joined from Austria, from Denmark, from Armenia, from France, and from Romania. So thank you to everyone who's joined in. If you have not dropped in the chat where you've joined from, please go ahead and add that. We will update the map if we get more additions, and we will include your country that you're viewing from in there as well. Okay, so I find this stuff fascinating, Cayetana, especially because you have real world experience of where organizations are. What is the biggest preparation step that you have seen organizations miss around their planning for these requirements when they do become law in their member country?
Well, there's one of our clients, but different clients that I spoke with, they focus more on the compliancy side, so that in case they will be audited, that they will have the check of being NIS2 compliant. So they will just look up all the controls that they are enforced to follow, and will make sure that somewhere in one policy, cryptography is mentioned, exit management, asset management. But that is for me one of the biggest risks of NIS2, because besides NIS2, we also have other legislations at this moment within the EU. We have, for example, also the DORA, the Cyber Resilience Act will also be enforced. So it's a lot of different frameworks and legislations that are dropped on organizations. So I can understand that their main focus now is to make sure that they are compliant and that they will have the check of being compliant also with NIS2, so that if they will be audited, that there will not be negative consequences. But that is how I'm seeing it. I believe organizations should flip it and should start seeing the benefits that NIS2 is bringing to them, because it's not only strengthening your own cyber resilient and as a whole as an organization, but also all of your suppliers, which means that during a cyber incident, you will communicate faster with them, share information faster, and that you can also recover sooner from the incident.
That makes a ton of sense. Now, you've mentioned that the directive also involves specifically making executive leadership responsible for cyber resilience. In your experience with the organizations that you've worked with so far, is that succeeding in getting leadership's attention about what they need to be doing?
I believe for sure we got leadership's attention about NIS2 because NIS2 is everywhere. But I believe the attention alone is not enough, because most of the times we know it maybe also from our own organizations of our clients, that most of the times the management will know, of course, the security measures that are implemented, but on a more general, broader scope. But NIS2 also required that they know what they contain and what they really mean. So I believe that there should be a culture shift within organizations to start including the management also. If you believe that there's also only a small cyber incident, start already now to include them, that in case an incident got bigger than we want, that they know what the effects could be of those cyber incidents in a broader scope, going further than only the financial damages. So we should have management trainings, tabletops, and test all of our running books with the management and all the other layers of the organizations.
We have found, so Veeam actually does a lot of incident response tabletops, both sort of large scale dedicated ones for Veeam customers, but also ones to sort of introduce folks in the industry who are thinking about this or maybe aren't where they want to be in their preparation to the steps that they need to follow. And Cayetana, I'm sure your experience has been the same. What we find is that there are a lot of steps that may be very familiar to us around communication, around planning, around managing how we talk to external organizations and manage communications as a whole, that if you haven't been through this, you might not have thought through. So that tabletop and planning is really important in my experience, and I expect you've seen the same thing.
Yes, indeed. And not only in the cybersecurity world, also in the physical security world, we tend to adjust or make run books after the incident happens, which is of course already too late. And also we write them based on our expertise, but we don't test them. So I believe that we should already start doing the scenario sessions now, and then afterwards writing and testing the run books to make sure that what we wrote is really possible to perform. Yeah.
Perfect. It makes a ton of sense. Now, one of the things that was notable about the Veeam research that we did that we mentioned before is that it was in fact global. What we were doing is talking to organizations all over the world. And of course, the compliance frameworks that are changing now are not just changing in the EU, they're changing globally as well. We have here in the United States a regulation put forth by part of the Department of Homeland Security, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. It was enacted a couple of years ago. It's going into force next year, called CIRCIA, the Cyber Incident Reporting for Critical Infrastructure Act. I've got a slide up here that compares NIS2 and CIRCIA. For our EU audience and for folks who are dialing in from here in North America, could you walk through some of the similarities and differences between those two frameworks?
Yes, for sure. I believe CIRCIA and the NIS2, starting from a general perspective, they both have the goal from a national perspective to strengthen the cyber resilience strategy from organizations. And you also see that both have both ask organizations to report incidents, but as you can see on the right side of the slides, there are some slightly differences. For example, NIS2 requires that you report within 24 hours, but then you have time to adjust and add information until 72 hours and your final report after 1 month. Where for CIRCIA, it depends whether you have an incident that requires, I believe, if it is a ransomware attack where money is asked, then you have to report faster than if this is not the case. So I believe that is a big difference. And another big difference is also the consequences of, for example, non-compliancy. What I saw about CIRCIA, and correct me if I'm wrong because my expertise is more NIS2, but what I saw is that CIRCIA does not have at this moment consequences if you do not follow CIRCIA, where NIS2 could result in fines.
The big difference so far for CIRCIA is just the reporting mandate. My guess is that what we're going to, and in fact, CIRCIA is, or the way that we handle critical infrastructure here in the United States is actually kind of more like what you described earlier for NIS2 in terms of different member states having the ability to change things on their own. We have sector-specific regulatory agencies for the critical infrastructure sectors that all have their own sets of requirements. CIRCIA is the first step to actually unify the requirements for all of those 16 critical infrastructures, and it's just around reporting, but we expect that reporting to be pretty instrumental, because if your incident response planning is good enough that you can report what you need to about a ransomware payment and have it be defensible and make a report about a covered incident within 72 hours, then you're already better, frankly, than a lot of organizations I talk to in terms of your incident response planning. Okay, before we shift gears here quickly, we'll go back to the map real quickly. We have added Saudi Arabia, so thank you very much for tuning in. We've got someone else joining from Europe, the Middle East, and Africa, specifically Saudi Arabia. So good to have you on board. If anyone else has joined from elsewhere in the world, there's still time. Go ahead and add that to the map if you'd like. But what I'd like to do for our talk today is let's shift gears a little bit, Mario, and I'll bring this over to you now, because you're deeply involved with Atos's planning around cyber incident recovery and cyber resilience. And so, so far, Cayetana and I have just been talking about compliance, specifically around NIS2 and CIRCIA, but what do you see in Atos's practice around cyber resilience generally?
Well, actually, what are we doing? Cyber recovery is a set of hardware and software services, tools, and methods to prepare our customers' businesses to recover from their worst business days. So what does that mean in terms of NIS2? NIS2, as an example, a big portion, I think it was in Article 18, is covering a lot of resilience topics. And actually, same with DORA, they are about to generate more resilient enterprises. So what can we do now together with Veeam to increase that resilience? And at first, to be very honest with you, when you presented the figures, like 75% of enterprise hit, 15 able to recover, I think, and then 27, even if they paid ransom, didn't get the data back. So not getting the data back is something that we really need to take care of. So let's prepare our customers, our customers' business to be able to recover, because the issue is that with all that complexity, and you see it on the slide, there are several different motivations, techniques, and goals. For each of those boxes, there might be 20 under boxes and sub boxes, and that adds complexity.
Absolutely.
And I'm very sorry to say, Cayetana, I mean, you, with helping, can also resolve complexity that stems from NIS2 or from any other regulation that you have to implement. So thank you very much to you, our colleagues in consulting, to help the customer. You're not alone there. Our colleagues come in and try to resolve that complexity that initially also come from new regulation that you have to implement. So having said all of that, all that complexity added, yes.
Yeah, so Mario, when Atos helps folks with that, we'll move along, because obviously, even though there's multiple types of threats, there are different solutions that are present that you see to get people to stop being a statistic, like we talked about before. So can you talk through some of those recovery requirements that folks need to actually master and put into place?
Absolutely. So what we do is we aim to counter this complexity generically, meaning, and this is where our valued partners like Veeam help us with to generate. So our consulting team comes in, identifies the crown jewels, and identifies every services that are alongside, and then we switch those backups of those crown jewels to immutable data, like making it unchangeable. Then we isolate it and run intelligence scans through that. And of course, after that, we have tools and workflows for smooth recovery. It's exactly what you mentioned, Cayetana. The recovery part is really the most crucial part, and run books and all that kind of thing to keep that up to date. So I'd say to wrap it up, different motivations, add complexity, more regulations in the initial phase, add complexity. Our colleagues of consulting come in, help with that complexity, decrease in our cyber recovery solution, helps to generically answer cyber resilience, cyber recovery or cybersecurity threats with infrastructure solutions.
That makes sense. And obviously, Atos has been a leader in the infrastructure space for quite a while. Why don't you talk those viewers and listeners today who are not familiar with why Atos is in the leadership position that it's in, what Atos brings to the table around infrastructure solutions for resilience?
Well, first of all, we are running vaults for our customers as we're talking. We implement vaults on customers' premises, in our data centers. All flavors exist. And as we do it very generically and with a simple infrastructure solution, it's pretty easy because Atos has written infrastructure all over it. So as you see, we are really a leader powering entire industries, and we are recognized for that for many years in consecutive years by those Gartners and ISGs and so on and so on.
It's actually very impressive. I know that a lot of organizations have mandates about going green, about reducing their carbon footprint. The idea that Atos is so far along with your carbon neutral journey, the idea that you have the scale of infrastructure that you have to help organizations get where they need to go around resilience is really impressive. And obviously, we at Veeam value our partnership with Atos greatly. Cayetana, Mario, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a great conversation. I love talking about resilience with our partners like Atos. I love talking about regulatory changes because they do tend to drive positive behavior. And I hope that our viewers today have enjoyed the conversation as well. Now, as I mentioned up front, I am joining you today from here in the United States. And for those of you who are familiar with the US, we have our Thanksgiving holiday this Thursday. So there will not be a Tech Bites live stream on Thursday, the 28th. It'll take a break for the US Thanksgiving holiday. However, we will be back next week. And on Tuesday, December 3rd, we will have a special show dedicated to the 12.3 Veeam data platform release. Again, that's going to be 12.3 being released on 12.3 Tuesday of next week. On Thursday, December 5th, our Tech Bites live stream will also return. And on Thursday, December 5th, we will be having a Veeam 100 show that is focused on object storage and on disaster recovery and how those two work together. So please tune in next week for those shows. And for those of you joining us from the United States, I wish you a great Thanksgiving holiday. And again, to wrap up, Mario, with you and Cayetana, thank you so much for joining us and talking us through Atos' cyber recovery services and Cayetana through NIS2 requirements. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Kate.